Hi guys, and welcome to Escape with Watch Views. My name is Steve, and today we're going to be reviewing two new Pagani design chronographs, the PD1773 and the PD1766. I received all of these watches for free. I don't have to send them back, but you guys know the deal by now. That's not going to sway my review one way or the other. You're always going to get my honest review on this watch channel. And if by the end of this review you want to pick up either of these watches, I'll be leaving affiliate links down in the video description. If you guys use those links, you don't pay any extra. This channel will just benefit a little bit from the commission earned, and that'll allow me to keep the channel going. So I really do appreciate it when you use my links. Thank you guys for the continued support. The current retail price for all of these watches is right around $100 US. That's before any taxes, sales, coupons, etc. And the reason I'm reviewing both of these is because they are currently on sale right now for right around $65. That's what I was able to get them down to. Excellent prices for both of these watches. Both of these watches also come in a couple different colorways, as you can see here. I think they all look pretty good. The 1766 does have a slight difference in the dials, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Both watches support the exact same set of specifications: a 316L stainless steel case, sapphire crystal, screw-down main crowns, screw-down case backs, 100 meters of claimed water resistance, and then both watches are powered by Seiko VK series Mecha Quartz movements. So if you guys are in the market for an affordable chronograph that packs all the specs, all the specs, it's pretty hard to beat Pagani design, and especially these two new releases. They aren't perfect, as always with Pagani, but I still think, especially at that $65, they're excellent value. So I say we get right into this full review, but before we do, doing a quick wrist check today, wearing my Tactical Frog Sub 300. Yeah, I haven't worn this watch in a while, but still really enjoy wearing it. I do prefer this one over Seastern and a couple other brands, so go check out the review for that one right up here. All right, let's get into the dimensions. I'm going to pop up the dimensions on screen. These were all measured with my digital calipers, but as you can see, the 1773 is quite a bit smaller than the 1766. Definitely smaller in diameter. That lug-to-lug distance is a big one as well. Both support 20mm lug widths. So yeah, I think they are really nice, and as you can see here, the case shape on the 1773, it's pretty nice. It has some nice turn down to the lugs there, and it's nice and stumpy. That's what I kind of like about this watch. It is a little bit thick, but it really kind of looks cool on wrist because it's so stumpy and short. So yeah, I think it looks really good. Picking up the 1766. You can see here, it's a little bit of a flatter case, but still pretty nicely done in my opinion. If you want something with a little more wrist presence, this is going to be the one for you. But I think both of them fit me pretty good. So I'm going to go outside right now and throw them on the wrist for you. And here we are on my 7.5-inch wrist. And this is, you know, pretty typical size for me. It's not difficult for me to pull this off. It does have just a tiny bit of curve down to the lugs there. So it hugs the wrist nicely. It's nice and comfortable. I've got no complaints with it when it's on a strap like this. I think it looks pretty good. You can see kind of right there, you know, it is a fairly reflective crystal. That's one of my main complaints with it. And, you know, getting in close, you can see this is a sandwich dial, which is a little bit different than the other dials. We'll talk about it in a little bit later. But yeah, the reflections are the main issue with this one. But I do still think it looks pretty good, and you know, the hands are bold enough where it's not a huge deal in my opinion. And here we got the PD1773. This is a 38mm case, so you can see it's wearing a little bit smaller than the other ones. On this lighter dial, you can see the reflections aren't as big of an issue. I do think there's a little bit more AR coating on this crystal, but you can definitely see the legibility is not great with this. Those numerals, they kind of get lost in this salmon dial. But again, you can see their sandwich dial, and we'll talk about it in more detail a little bit later. But you know, on a brown leather strap, I think these salmon dials, they look great. They look really cool, and I do like the size of this thing. The case shape on this, it's nice and short and stubby, but there is some turn down to the lugs there and some nice chamfering and stuff. So I think it does look pretty good. And here we are back on the PD1766, and you know, you can immediately see that size difference. It does have a bigger wrist presence. Some people like it, some people don't. This model, it's not as bad in my opinion with the reflective crystal. This one does have the applied indices and a very shiny bracelet. So this is the bracelet that comes on it, butterfly clasp. We'll talk about it a little bit later. I'm able to get a good fit on it, but it definitely feels a little bit heavier and a little bit more substantial on the bracelet, as you would expect. And it is pretty comfortable. You can see there, it fits and conforms to my wrist very nicely. So yeah, there it is on the bracelet. And here we are back on the smaller PD1773, and again, I mean, you can immediately see the size difference. I do really like the size of this watch. I'm usually, 38 is a little on the small side for my preferences, but I like the way that this thing wears better than the other one. So just something to keep in mind, I guess. And you can definitely see here, legibility is much better on this colorway. Nice sunburst to the dial as well. And overall very satisfied with the look of this thing. Crystal is still reflective though, but for the most part you can read the dial pretty nicely. You got nice turn down to the wrist, you got some light play off of the bracelet here, and you have a typical clasp there, so more to come in the bracelet section, but yeah, this bracelet is actually halfway decent. Alright, so let's talk about case finishing. We're going to start over here. They are pretty much the same style of case finishing. Brushed on the top, brushed on the sides, polished chamfers. I think they've done a pretty good job with both of them. If I have to give the edge to one of them, I will say I think this one is a little bit nicer finished. So you do have a circular brushing on top of the lugs here, and it's pretty nicely done, as you can see here. Nice and consistent. You have a horizontal brushing on the sides of the case there, and again, nicely done. I'm quite impressed with the finishing on this watch. You got a nice high polished chamfer that runs from those lug tips there, as you can see, and then comes up all the way to the other side. Again, really nicely done, and even those chamfer, those transitions are pretty crisp on this thing. They're not San Martin levels, but they are pretty nicely done for a watch in this price range. Quite impressed by this. Again, horizontal brushing, screw down crown here, signed, nicely done, fully polished pushers there. The bezel on this thing, it's pretty nice. It has a vertical brushing on the top surface there. You can kind of see right here, it's not straight up and down. It does go on a little bit of an angle. It's such a small surface that you don't really notice that, so it's not a big deal that they kind of applied that crooked, but a nice high polished chamfer there, and then circular brushed on the bottom edge of the bezel. I think the bezel on the case finishing on this watch is really nicely done. Very impressed with it. Flipping it to the case back, you have just a little bit of a different style from Pagani design. It does have the model number there. 10 bar Pagani shield. Nicely done though. This bottom edge here doesn't really contact the wrist at all. It's a little bit sharp, but not a big deal. Circular brushing on the bottom of the lugs. I think overall pretty nice. Now working our way to the 1766. Again, nicely done. Mixture of brushed and polished surfaces. Circular brushing on the tachymeter bezel, polished on the bottom edge of it there. You can see you have vertical brushing on the tops of the lugs. And again, it's done pretty nicely. Horizontal brushing on the sides of the case here, and again, no issues with that. Nice sharp chamfers as well, pretty solid on the transitions there. Nicely done. I've got very little to complain about with the case finishing on this. Flipping it to the crown side here, again, a signed screw down crown, polished pushers, no issues with the case finishing. Again, nicely done for a watch in this price range. And flipping it over to the case back, you have a more traditional style case back here. Again, nicely done. Fully, it's polished and bead blasted. Polished on the bottom of the edge of the case here. Again, a little bit sharp, but doesn't really translate on wrist. It's a comfortable watch. I've got no issues with it. But yeah, pretty nicely done. And I think both of these watches, they do punch well above their weight when it comes to the finishing, and that's where, usually Pagani does a pretty good job with the finishing in their price range. Sometimes they do have a miss here and there, but these are both done really nicely, in my opinion, for what you're paying for them. All right, let's talk about the crystals on these things. First, we will test them for sapphire. Let's see, positive for sapphire there, and positive for sapphire there. So both crystals are exactly the same, which is pretty unusual to have two crystals that are exactly the same. I don't think they're the same crystal, but they're done the same way. So they are single dome with blue anti-reflective coating. You can see the blue right there on both of these watches. The blue is pretty heavy. It does a pretty good job of cutting down on reflections. The single dome crystals, so they are domed on the top edge, but then flat on the bottom edge. So that gives you that distortion that you can see there. See that distortion there? That's what tells me this is a single dome crystal. Single dome crystals are also very reflective, and that's just their nature. So they got to throw a lot of AR coating on them to get them usable. They've done that here, in my opinion. I mean, they're still not great. They're still definitely not great. I would love to see just a regular double dome crystal on these things. That would be a lot better. But this is the hand we are dealt with Pagani sometimes. Yeah, they seem to really like that distortion. I know some people like that distortion. I used to. but I just really want a clear crystal now. So that's really my only complaint. You can see there's the dome of that one. Very slight dome on both of these ones. Crystal does sit just a little bit higher on this model, but yeah, I think the crystals, they're okay. They're just not my favorite style of crystal. It's just, yeah, that's, I don't know. I'm not sure the conscious decision they make to put this style of crystal in. I've told them many times that these single domes are not great. They're just very reflective. A double dome crystal would give them pretty much the same look. They would just miss out on some of that distortion there. Maybe they like distortion, I don't know. But yeah, that's my thoughts on the crystal. Just not my favorite type of crystal. But they at least attempted to cover up the negative part of a single dome with a lot of blue anti-reflective coating. So yeah, that's it. Not great. All right, so let's talk about the dials on these things. So I'm going to start with the PD1766 because these are a little bit different. So this black dial here is the one that's different. So the black dial on this is a very textured dial there, as you can see. And it is also a sandwich dial. So that layer of lume and that faux patina there, that is on a secondary sub layer, and you got little cutouts in the top layer of the dial. So that's a sandwich dial. It does have an applied shield logo there. Nice set of hands on that. We'll talk about those in just a minute. But yeah, just a different take on this dial. The sub dials are they just seem to be a flat dial. They don't have any texture to them or anything like that. Sunken just ever so slightly there. But I think they all look pretty good. This is probably my favorite of the two, I would say. I don't know. It's hard to say. There's a lot going on the other dial, and we'll get to that one right now. So this sunburst dial is available in a couple different colors like you saw earlier. You have applied indices at all the hour markers, truncated ones at 3 and 9 o'clock. The subdials on this one are really interesting. You have kind of this raised outer ring and then a sunken lower ring to the subdial there, and that's where you got those concentric circle patterns. Pretty nicely done though. A little bit different on the second hands there. I think it's the same on both models, which it is. 24-hour subdial there, minute counter there for your chronograph. No running seconds hand on this one. You got your applied Pagani shield again, and just a black printed minute track there around the outside. Again, I think the dial on this one is really nicely done. It's a nice blue sunburst dial. I have a very similar dial, a very similar watch from San Martin. The San Martin is definitely done a little bit nicer, but this one actually holds its own on it. The handset that they use is pretty nice as well. Good size, broad arrow on the hour hand there, faceted nicely. And then you got your nice sized minute hand there. The second hand on this one is very simple. It does get lost a little bit if you're trying to track time on this thing, so just something to keep in mind, but I don't think it's something that, it's not a deal breaker obviously, but it does definitely get lost every once in a while, so yeah, just thought I would mention it. The lume on these two watches is terrible. I will say the lume on this one, it is all the same color. It glows green, but it's bad. This one is two-tone lume, so you have blue on the dial, and it's that dark blue which fades really quickly, and then you have the green lume on the hands. I don't know why they went two-tone on that, but they did. Yeah, really interesting. I'm not really sure what was going on with that decision, but either way, don't rely on the lume for these things. They're just bad. All right, let's talk about the dials on the PD1773. So these ones are also really nicely done. I think pretty high quality for the price you're paying. They are, again, sandwich dials, so you got that lower layer of lume. Nice cutouts as well. Both are sunburst dials. Pretty subtle on the blue model, but it is there, and it does look pretty good. If you can look, let's see if I can show you guys, right at about the 10 o'clock position on either, you can see there's a little polished ring that goes around the outside of this bezel, kind of separating that minute track from the rest of the dial. Really a cool detail on this watch. You have a printed logo at the 12 o'clock position. You have a date at 4:30, kind of I guess a big wart on a otherwise beautiful dial. They just need to get rid of that, or at least, at the very least, color match it, please. Other than that, though, nice sunken subdials there with a concentric circle pattern on it. Really nicely done. The handset that they chose, these are the updated longer hands, so really nicely done. Again, you do have an arrow tip on the chronograph second hand, so it's nice and easy to find those. I've got really not much to complain about on these dials. I think these dials are some of the better dials you're going to find in this price range. The blue one is definitely more legible than this salmon colored one. This one does get lost a little bit in some of the certain lighting conditions, definitely like a lower lighting situation. You can hardly read this one, and it's not helped at all by the absolutely abysmal Lume on these things. Do not depend on them for Lume at all. They're just bad. All right, let's talk about the movements on them. So the movements, again, they're pretty much the same Seiko VK series Mecha Quartz movements. VK64 here, VK63 here, or maybe it's other way around. I don't know. They're the exact same movement, except for this one has a running seconds hand. This one here has a running seconds hand at the 6 o'clock position. So you do have constant movement on the dial, which some people really like to see. I think it's just a matter of personal preference. You know, they function exactly the same. The top pushers will start and stop the chronograph second hands. You can see there, stopping on here, starting over here. Nice solid feedback to those. This bottom pusher here, you push it, it'll reset and snap right back. The alignment on all of these are actually pretty good. They're just a hair off on a couple of the watches, but for the most part, good. Not enough off to bother me. The watches themselves, they're operated by these screw down 3 o'clock crowns here, and again, from Pagani, nice and smooth. I've got no complaints with that. Pulling it out, it does hack the movements. Yeah, it does everything you need it to do. They're reliable movements, 2-year battery life, and I believe plus or minus 20 seconds per month accuracy. So yeah, you're not going to have any real problems with these movements. They're going to last you a very long time. All right, lastly, we're going to talk about the bracelets. We're going to set these straps off to the side here. We'll start with the PD1766. So this is a 3-link bracelet, as you can see here. Polished on the outer links, which I absolutely hate. That's going to get scratched and scuffed immediately, and it doesn't flow with the case. I just don't get what their decision was with this. I know the watch that this is an homage to uses the same type of polished outer links. I think it looks bad on the original. I think it looks bad here. They just need to stop doing that. Fully brushed bracelet would look a whole lot better, in my opinion. You do have brushing on the middle link here. Solid female end links there, female pivot end links. You can see they do get caught on each other every once in a while. It's usually just when you're picking it up off of a table or something like that, but just thought I would mention on wrist, you don't really notice that. You know, the tolerances on the bracelet, they're a little loose. It does jangle a little bit. It's not horrible though. This bottom edge, just a little bit sharp for my wrist. Over a full day, you know, I did start to feel it towards the end of the day. It does have a butterfly clasp, so I'm not able to get a perfect fit on this watch, though there's no micro adjust on this thing. You do have push pins for adjusting the links. I removed 3 links for my 7.5-inch wrist. But yeah, it's just not the best bracelet. You know, like I mentioned, I keep mentioning that San Martin, that one is also not the best bracelet. It has the same setup, butterfly clasp, no micro adjust, polished outer, just not my favorite style of bracelet. I think the San Martin is definitely a little bit nicer than this one, but yeah, just it's not a great bracelet. It's serviceable. It's just not my favorite. Working our way to the PD1773. Again, we have a fully solid bracelet here. You have a 5-link on this one. So these outer links, you can see that little polished section there. That is a separate section. This little polished section here is actually part of the middle link. I'm not really sure why they did it. Obviously, cost cutting, but it's such a little thing that they probably could have done that on the outer ones and saved some money too. But it is what it is. It's something you don't really ever notice, but just thought I would point it out. But brushed on the outers, I think the brushing is done pretty nicely, actually. Polishing on those little sections there, again, done fairly nicely. Female, solid end links. This one, I don't have any problems of the links getting caught on each other, and these are fully articulating links, as you can see here. So you got this middle link here is separated from all these other ones. So it is a nice flowing bracelet, in my opinion. I do feel like they've kind of toned down this bottom edge here as well. So this one is actually, for me, very comfortable. I know a lot of people complained about it, and I think that's mostly based on the weight. It does feel a little bit light. It is a little bit jangly. In this first link here, there is just a little bit of play in it. So I just think that kind of translates to a little bit of a cheaper feel on wrist. But the nice thing about this is you do have push pins for adjusting the size, but then you have a traditional style clasp. It is just a cheap, thin, fold over clasp. A little bit thin on this part here, so it does kind of flop around a little bit, but double button pushers, they work exactly like you would want them to. Fully milled on the inner bits here, nice tight tolerances, 3 levels of micro adjust. There's no sharp edges on the clasp or anything, so it's been a fairly comfortable experience for me on wrist, and I do think the bracelet actually looks pretty good, and it does flow pretty nicely with this case. As you can see here, it does have just ever so slightly protrudes about the tips of the lugs, but really a non-issue. I don't think it looks bad at all. It's something that you don't really notice on wrist, and I think it's just a good overall bracelet for this price. It's a pretty decent bracelet. So yeah, just not excellent bracelets, what you kind of expect in this price range. So there you go, guys. There is 2 excellent value propositions from Pagani Design. The chronographs have always been excellent. The PD1774, the 1718, I guess. I can't even remember the numbers. But some of their other chronographs, they're excellent. PD1701, yeah, they're just great value. These are no exception. I think they look pretty nice. You have your typical downfalls of Pagani with the crystals, the Lume, and the bracelets. They're just not great. And that's just what you kind of have to expect when you're paying $65 for a watch like this. But I think if you are okay with those drawbacks, you know, throw these on some straps. They are excellent. They're really nice watches, and I think you're really going to enjoy them. I think that's it for me. Thanks a lot for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya.